gone ahead and cut myself. Hello, welcome to Relove Guitars. Sam here on a rainy Sunday evening. Oh yeah, I broke a string just stretching the strings on this guitar. Anyway, welcome to yet another video. This is Pat's Harley Benton TE. Well, I don't quite know what they call it. It's a standard series Telecaster Beastie. Hello, different views. And the story behind this one is that Pat contacted me locally, lives not far from me, and I think she'd come via, probably, I'm guessing, but my detective brain tells me she came via a search on Google, which my Google business returned Really Loved Guitars, and Google lists Really Loved Guitars as a guitar shop. And initially I was annoyed about that because a few people rang up asking for guitar strings and I couldn't help them because it's not really in my interest to supply stock and supply guitar strings. But in the case of Pat, it brought her to me and she asked if I had any guitars for sale, and I said, although I didn't, I said, what I can often do is buy, look around for people and find something that suits them and buy that and set it up for them. So we got talking about that, and it turns out that Pat is returning to playing after many, many years not playing, and she previously, back in the 70s, I guess, played classical guitar, or played probably folk songs on a country and western or folk songs on a nylon strung guitar. So we talked about what kind of guitar she wanted, and she wanted an electric guitar, and I suggested that I'd look around at some alternatives, and because she was into country music, the Telecaster stood out as a good choice. And of course Harley Benton have very inexpensive, now I say inexpensive, they're listed at something like £68 on their site, but since Brexit they add VAT to that, but even despite all of that, the whole package with the Harley Benton cable, tuner, and a stand all came to about £114 with no other duties to pay. So it came well within the customs regulation figure, and kind of importantly, it also came through with no hassle at all, no customs shenanigans. So for 114 quid, a good little setup for her. I also found her a Roland Microcube amp for a little home amp, which will play on batteries or charger, power supply. So it's a nice little package, and with a setup all included, all of that in under £300 for getting back into playing, which is really, I think for her is a good price, but also a good price to have the reassurance that it will be set up to play very light, low action, and to change out anything that needs changing out. So for this guitar, I've said to her what we'll do is put on a tusk adjustable nut. I'm not sure what this one's made of. I think it's plastic more than anything, but I can't remember on these, but for 68 quid it's probably plastic. And what I'll do is I'll set it up, give it a fret level to make sure that it will play low and light for her. And I think realistically, because we're putting a tusk nut on, I think I'll replace these string trees for her as well. So there are just some standards now that I'm doing more and more and not really even quibbling about, and that is where there's metal string trees and you've got a plastic nut, change both of those out. And beyond that, once you've got the nut right and the string trees are tusk, and we've stretched all the slack out of the strings, there's absolutely no reason why this guitar won't play and stay in tune, or stay in tune for her once, play nicely in tune and stay in tune. So that's the plan, to give her the best experience possible of coming back into playing the guitar after many, many years away. Now, being a left-handed guitar, I don't get the joy of playing this to try and find out how it plays. I don't get to sample it, but that's fine. I can still set it up to taste. Now the first thing, sorry about the delicious bloody tissue. That's I'll edit that. I'll put some pixels on that or something in After Effects. Do you still use that? Yeah, so this actually looks like, unless I'm mistaken, yeah, this is a this is a right-handed nut put on backwards. I better take a picture of that because that. Oh, let's do a close-up. That's what we got this thing for. Hey, sorry, fingers. Close-up of Harley Benton's cheeky right-handed nut doing service as a left-handed nut. That's not really good, Harley Benton. You surely could do a bit better than that. Come on, that isn't right. Even though it's only a little amount of money, don't do that. Well, so that's cool. I've now realised I've got my close-up camera on all the time. That's how it is. And it doesn't want to focus properly. Oh, hello. Come on, thank you. Okay, it's just I'll keep it running as a third angle or whatever, third camera angle, but if necessary I'll just grab it for close-ups. Oh, so yeah, why don't I do a fly round? Okay, so this is a kind of thing that people are always interested in Harley Bentons. So, you know, lots of people do Harley Bentons, and I think there's probably a truth that a lot of people do Harley Bentons for the click value. I do them only because customers, where a customer wants one, it's still interesting. So Harley Benton Standard Series, 68 quid before added VAT, which comes to about 75 quid or something by the time, nearly 80 quid by the time you factored that in. So what have we got? Well, we've got this pretend wood or dark stained wood neck. I don't know what they've made this out of. It's a sort of, it's probably painted, stained, but it's okay, right? It's from the era of not getting caught up by the site's regulations, constraints on rosewood, so they don't use rosewood, and they use some sort of technically produced wood, which is compressed. As far as I understand it, it's a compressed light wood which they paint or stain. He said licking blood off his hand. So what have we got? Well, we've got a decent neck, a 22 fret neck. We've got a headstock that's much more like a Fender these days. Can't really complain. And we've got a decent feeling satin finished neck. Can't really see it very well in close up. Nothing unusual or bad about that. Sealed tuners, which aren't fabulous or bad. They'll do the job just well. String trees, metal string trees, which I'm not a fan of, as you probably know. And everything you'd expect in a Telecaster, basically. Single coils, three-way switch, volume tone, that kind of fitting, and a full width, I think it's a full thickness body. I can't ever remember. Have I tried grabbing one of these? And it's top mounted, so the strings don't go through the body. They're top mounted, okay? But, you know, for such a little amount of money, that's a fabulous guitar to start with. And you know, when you start adding it all up and you say, well, okay, compared to what I started with, it's a great value guitar. Is it playable out of the box? Usually, yes, sort of. It depends what you expect or what you want from a guitar. It's playable, but a lot of people send them to me because they wouldn't be happy playing them the way they are. So, for example, the frets are a little bit sharp on this, as always. So you can do some softening off of the frets. There's a little bit of, if I'm mistaken from yesterday, a little bit of overhang fret sprout. I can feel it there. A plasticky sort of feeling nut that's put on back to front because they haven't got any left-handed nuts, so they fitted a right-handed nut, which wouldn't be any good. It wouldn't contribute to the thing playing very well. So we definitely should get rid of that. Now, I don't have any left-handed nuts myself, but I will convert one because I'm going to make it adjustable. So I'll convert the one I've got, which is something I do quite regularly. But they've just chucked one on and not bothered the fact about the slant of the nut slot going in the wrong direction. When I repurpose one, I make sure that the slant goes in the correct direction. Okay, so it's a perfectly good starter guitar, and we're going to give it the best setup possible to make it play nice and low and light. Now the problem I've got straight away is that I've bust a string on it, so I don't really want to have to sacrifice a whole pack of strings. And I haven't got any new packs of sacrificial strings. My supplier has let me down. I'm kidding. I've got some ukulele strings. Have I got anything that I can sacrifice one from that I play regularly? I suppose I could sacrifice the strings on this. Yeah, let's do that. I don't mind changing the strings on this because I will play that. I played it last night here actually. So this is, I don't know if you can see it, this is my studio, my workshop guitar, but it could well be due a string change anyway, so why not? Let's repurpose this top E string and I'll fit some new strings on this. I've got some few little tweaks I might want to do with this one anyway. So this has these have a locking nut here, which this little blade cup will not stop bleeding. So I just want to undo this. There you go. Yeah, it's crazy to. I don't want to waste a whole set of strings just for a sacrificial string for doing fret leveling. So, as always, that won't go through because it's sticking. I will find myself a fine 1.5mm hex key, hopefully, and push it through. Thank you. Right. Yeah, just keeps on giving, this knife cut. All right, so now in this, I said to Pat that this video would take 3 to 4 weeks to get up online, which is the truth because I send them overseas to overcome my crazy UK internet problem, lack of. But thankfully, I've got a good guy, Bert in Oklahoma, who has very kindly helped me out by setting up a spare PC, just so I can dial into it and upload my videos. And of course, to do that, I have to send them via snail mail first to him at home, which he then uploads or copies across onto his laptop, and we go from there. And I log in from the UK. And because I'm using his broadband speeds, all I have to do is be able to log in and sign into YouTube from where I am. Oh my God, is it long enough? Oh my God, look at that. It's top mounted and it's still not quite long enough. I don't think I'm going to get this in here. Well, that was a pain. That is really a pain. Is there any way I can get this in through there? Is it even vaguely enough? I don't think it is, you know. Can I pull it through in any way, shape or form? Thanks. If it was a locking nut, I could have just about got away with that. Hang on a minute, surely it's long enough. No, I don't know why I'm telling myself it's long enough and it isn't. Yeah, if I had some locking tuners, I might just be able to get it through far enough to lock it in place. As it stands, it's nigh on an impossibility. Let's hold on to this end, see what we can do. Come on. All this to save a few pence. I can't even get that grip on it. Come on. Double round. Ow. These pliers don't actually grip anything. It was a waste of time. The flat-ended ones, please. Might just grip. Sorry about this stupid delay. No, that was a waste of time. Oh, bugger. No, I've got no choice. Another packet of string. Thanks. Another packet of string wasted. Just have bleed everywhere. You just hanging on there. Keep me hanging on. That'll do. You still running? You still got power? Yeah. No, wait a minute. You aren't powered. Why aren't you powered? Oh, crikey. 1, 2, 3. What is on and what isn't? That's not on, that's why. Just as well I've spotted that. Yep, now it's on. Okay. Right, I guess I have no choice but to use a set of strings. Simply 9, 9, 9. Not knowing anything. I'm gonna use something I'm not likely to use. Let's see, 46 is I'm gonna use, 46 is I'm gonna use. Right, I'm gonna use this odd, one of these odd, I'm gonna use a 10. It's not ideal, but I use a 10 out of this set. I'm really gonna use these. What a pain in the, what's it? Harley Benton bolt. Right, let's just get back in where we were. I really have a ton of strings up there, but none of them are probably liable to. Oh God! I don't want to stop the videos, but I also hate like hell to throw away. No, just sod it. I can't be bothered. And it's, you know, I'm holding on to a pack of strings that rarely get likely to be used because they're of a size that very few customers ask for. I think I just had them almost by accident. So holding onto them is a bit of a false economy. There's birds making a lot of noises out there. They're trying to be springy here in the UK, which I'm extremely grateful for, I have to tell you. It's been a while coming. Sorry, Pat, I didn't mean to frighten you. Just getting this loaded up. Now this extra loading of the 10 on here will make very little difference to anything I'm doing. It's just as a means to keep the guitar fully under tension while we do the setup part of things. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate my way to where I have, where did I put them? Yeah. Somewhere I have a set of nuts that I'm going to use. My fingers are not working. I've got, here's a right-handed one ready for the job, which I can convert to left and get the right way around. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do with this guitar, I could level the frets with this nut the way it is. It's not necessary to change it right this second, but I will need to do it at some point. Let's do it. Let's do the nut bit slightly later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tune this up. Actually, before I tune it up, I'm going to measure what we've got in terms of neck relief and in terms of the bridge settings, first and last fret action. So currently, as set, sorry if it's not a great view, currently as set, we're clocking in at a massive 3mm and 3 millimeters on the high and low frets. Well, first of all, that's too high an action. Now, you have to ask yourself, why has Thomann sent this out, or Harley Benton sent this out with such a high action? And it could be because they think everyone who plays a Telecaster hits, is a rhythm guitar player and hits it really hard and needs a very high action. Well, not the case in my experience. Most customers want a lower action than that. They want it to be easier to play than that. So my aim is to start off by lowering this. Now, it may be that they've set high action because they below a certain action there are uneven frets which will interfere with the way the guitar plays. It's highly likely that's the case, but it's not inevitable. So what I'll do is, assuming that's probably the case, I'm just going to set all of these saddles, pairs of saddles, down to around about where I'm looking for. Fine tune them a little bit. And then I'll sort of experiment with the strings and see if we show up any uneven frets. So Pat, for your reference, the bridge saddles are the place where you adjust what I call the last fret action on your guitar, the height of it down here. Of course it has an impact on the height down here, but it's most noticeable down here because of the principles of the triangle. And in my experience, you can set on a guitar like this, you should be able to set about 1.5 on the low E, 1.5 millimeters as measured at the last fret, coming down across the strings in a gradient to 1.2 on the last fret, on the high E, 1.2 on the high E. That's about as low as you want to go. It's sort of starting to try and push it a bit after that. But for this sort of guitar, we should be able to start at round about there without too much protest. Now, what's not uncommon is that once we set it to about that height, which I'm just doing now, several things happen. First of all, we'll end up very quickly discovering if there are uneven frets at play in this neck, which may explain why the action was set quite high in the first place. So what I'll do is I'll just tune it at all stages. I want to have it sort of tuned approximately to pitch. Ooh! That tuner grated. And that one. So I'm just roughly at pitch. I'm going to just give it a little bit more stretching. It's not crucial that it's in tune at this point in time, and with the nut as it is, it's unlikely to stay in tune. But I'm just getting it approximately there right now for the purposes of assessing how that loading affects the neck. That is roughly in tune. Now I'm looking down the neck, and the first thing I can tell you is that it's very straight, so I'm not expecting to see much curvature. And so if I capo the first fret, if I can think where my capo has gone underneath all this stuff, well, at least one of my capos might be. Okay, I've got two sets of strings hidden over there, but they're full sets, and I don't want to use them up for spare strings either. Right, so to detect how much curvature is in the neck, what I'll do is I'll use the high E string, but I'll capo the guitar at the first fret, meaning the first fret, or the high E string, is pressed down against the first fret, and I'll hold it. Same string, I'll also hold it down at the last fret, and then what it tells me is, by judging roughly halfway in between, if I look at the gap halfway in between, it tells me how much curvature there is in the neck. If there's no curvature, then the string will already be touching, it'll be flat, and the string will be touching the frets here as well. If there's a reverse curvature or a hump, it'll also be touching, and I won't necessarily know that it's backbowed or reverse humped, but either way, if the neck is flat or backbowed, the strings here will be touching the frets, and what it means is that fretted notes down here won't play. Now, if they do play, although the neck is quite flat, and the only downside about that, if I leave it as it is, there is a little bit of relief. If I leave it as it is, it may be that when we strike the strings hard, you might find that we get what I call fret slap, which is where the string spins around and just clips the frets because there isn't enough room. In fact, it doesn't sound like it sounds like there's a little bit, there might be a little bit somewhere in this, but it sounds pretty good. There's a little bit of clatter on this first fret, sort of low E. That might have to do with the fact they've used this right-handed nut reversed. So I'm going to have a sort of check of that. If I decided that it wasn't flat, it wasn't curved enough, there wasn't enough room for the strings to move around when struck and strummed, then what we do, and in fact it is very low, but let's see what it actually is. What we can do is we can give the strings a little more room by dialing in some more relief or curvature in the neck, and that's what the truss rod is for. A lot of people have misconceptions about the truss rod. They think that its purpose, I'm just trying to see how. It's a very clumsy way. That's around about just about 0.2. That's about as little as I want, but it's actually not far off the mark. It's pretty good. I'll leave it as it is for now. Yeah, so if it was too flat, and for example, often you can find if the weather changes, the neck this tiny bit of curvature may just flatten out a little bit, and then suddenly we're getting notes that are buzzing down here because they're hitting the hump, if you like, in the center of the fingerboard. If you get that, then that's why we have a truss rod adjuster, so that we can then turn the rod to slack the neck a little bit more and allow the strings to pull the neck into a bit more of a gentle curve in that direction. That's what the adjuster is for. Some people think it's for changing your playing action. It's not. It does alter your playing action, particularly in the center of the neck, or the center of the truss rod's length. So if you think about putting more curvature in it, then it will make more space between the string and the frets, which are now at the bottom of a bigger curve. That definitely makes the playing action feel greater here, but it's mainly in one spot. It's not the place you go to adjust your action. The place you go to adjust your action overall is the first and the last fret, but the lower you go, the more room, you're more likely you're going to have to add some curvature into your neck so that the strings have room to spin without hitting the frets. Not bad on this, it's kind of where it should be, which is good. The first fret action as set with this weird nut that they've got, or the weird use of a back to front nut. Let's have a look. My target would be between 0.3 and 0.4. 0.4 to be on the safe side. It's quite a fair bit above that. Not an absolute ton, but it's above it. So we've got room to bring that down, but we'll change it anyway. Now, with this nut, it's hard to tell what they use. It feels like plastic to me. If I was going to adjust that nut, keep that nut, then one way we could do it is to recut it. Have they cut it? Have they recut it? I'm wondering. It's possible they have. They may have just used the right-handed unit to start with. But what I would do is recut it to be absolutely certain, like that it was pointing backwards and heading down. That's just on 0.4. And I'm going to do the same to the other ones. Now I will change it. I don't know if they use new bone in all of their models now. This is a slightly squidgy sort of plastic. It could be what they call new bone. Truth is, I think it would probably work as is, but I think it's worth putting the tusk one in. I'm also just for here, I'm just making sure that this action is right while I do the fret leveling. I'll come back and I'll change the nut over afterwards. This is probably a bit high over here. Yeah. So I'm keeping the strings under tension, and it sounds like it's protesting a bit, but it's not doing it any harm. So this is a fairly crude method for adjusting the fret slots, nut slots, not the fret slots, the nut slots, but it's actually very, very effective, and it makes a bit of dust and stuff for the time being, but when we come to tidy it up, it works very well. So I don't know what this material is. It's still a little bit high, so I'm doing this by eye. You could get your feeler gauge under there and measure every single little cut you make, just to be absolutely sure. Now I'm down at about 0.3, so I'm at its lowest feasible level. Somewhere in here I will have a little brush. This is now gone for a walk somewhere. Here it is. I can tidy up this shaggy stuff here. So, out of tune again. Let's just put it quickly back roughly into tune. Now these tuners, while I'm disparaging about them, I'm disparaging about them only because they're crunchy. They feel like the gears are a bit badly made, and they'll feel crunchy to work. They won't affect your tuning in any way. They'll make it less than pleasant to tune, or not as pleasant as it should be, but they won't go out of tune. That's not down to these tuners. Counterintuitively, the tuning stability, in my experience, comes from two primary sources. First one is the nut, and the second one is the amount of unreleased slack in your strings. Now you notice how it's going out of tune right there. That's because of the unreleased slack in the strings. Not so much the nut in this case. It's probably working quite well at the moment, but it's down to the tuners. Down to the unreleased slack in the strings, not the tuners. So it follows, to get your guitar to play and stay in tune, you need to first of all get the right nut, and I'm going to use Tusk. Put that time and investment into running this, getting a backward cut on this, but also putting it on little grub screws so we can adjust it to the perfect height. Get the nut right, improve it with the Tusk string tree so we're not using metal against metal. And then the other 50% really is going to be taking all the slack out of the new strings that we put on in the end. And that's something that, for Pat's benefit and anyone else who's buying guitars, you need to do this every time you put your strings on. Not the nut, you get that set once and leave it, but you need to stretch out the strings thoroughly every time you come to change the strings. And it takes about 20 minutes to do it thoroughly, and if you don't, what the unreleased slack in those strings, or in the whole length of the string, will continue to sort of, I call it, leaching itself out over time. Every time you bend the string, it will go slightly out of tune. Every time you move the string, like I've been doing there, it puts it out of tune. Every time you strum a chord really hard, it'll put it out of tune, just by a tiny amount, but annoyingly so. Okay, right now I've done three things. I've adjusted the last fret action by lowering the bridge saddles to my approximate target. I've checked the neck relief and noticed it's about where I'd want it. Perhaps tad could be a fraction flat, but it will be okay. If it plays, it will be comfortable. And I have got my nut slots to the right height, even though it's not necessarily in the material I ultimately want to use, but for now it's set up right. Now that's the ideal action that I want this guitar to have. What follows, or the question that now arises, is, having set that action, does this guitar play all the way up and down its neck? this actually does. I'm really impressed. A little bit of buzzing now creeping in down here on the PE string. Well, mostly, certainly in the high treble notes, that was good. But you can hear now we've got a lot of buzz creeping back in, which is probably why the action was set higher. So we've got a good, not bad, everything seems pretty good over this side. Here, it's not as happy. Now what I found is the leveling that I do has two effects, and I've sort of learned this. It's amazing actually. A little bit of cut off there. So I've got a high fret somewhere around here. Generally speaking, that is pretty damn good for a beginner guitar, an entry-level guitar. It's not overly low on this side now, and it's protesting. It's not sounding good. The fret leveling I do will take care of those that slight unevenness where it chokes out on the big bend. Actually, it's usually up here, but in this guitar it's more down here. The fret leveling will take care of that, but it will also gently scoop out a tiny bit more space for the strings, and it will alleviate this buzz. Now, I didn't think it used to do that, this method of fret leveling, and so I kind of tried it out a few times. And I used to say, oh no, leveling won't get rid of that buzz. I used to say that buzz can only be, because it's everywhere, it can only be raised or got rid of by raising the action slightly or increasing the curvature of the neck to give the strings more room. But the method has proved me wrong, and it's shown that in fact it will eke that out or improve it by because of the method I use. And it's a bit of a mathematical doodah as to why it is, but put it simply, if you're into that kind of thing, when I map the curve on this, in fact let's get into it since we're going to do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to now mark up the strings. I'll talk about it as I go. When I do this leveling, I level the frets with the guitar in the fully strung playing configuration. Traditionally, guitar techs, and still do, many of them, majority of them in fact, guitar techs will either take the neck off, or they will take the strings off, and they will adjust the neck until it's dead flat, and then they will use a file to go over the strings, called a fret file of some sort. They'll go over the strings until they've evened out the heights of the frets, and they'll check that using a fret rocker. And once they've got all the frets relatively level relative to each other, then the job's done, and they'll restring them. They'll crown the frets to reshape them. They'll polish them out to make sure that they're not scratchy, and then restring and play. And that's the conventional method of fret leveling. This method I like because it not only we do it with the strings on and the neck already slightly curved. Now, it's not just the fact that it's curved that makes it slightly more accurate. The reason it's slightly more accurate is because the method I'm using levels the frets while the neck is pushed, compressed in that direction, right? So you think about the loading of the strings, they are trying to pull the neck upwards around the anchor points down here, but because it can't do that, the force is pulling the neck this way. It's compressing it, and in compressing it, the neck behaves differently in terms of its shape from how it behaves when it's flat. And so if you level it flat and then put it back under load, you introduce those compression effects which change where the frets sit and how they sit. You introduce those effects after you've done the leveling, right? And this method, those effects are in play now as I'm about to level, because they are the neck is fully loaded and compressed in that direction. So I'm now going to do the leveling with the neck compressed and fully loaded. Now, that's one of the benefits, the fact that it's very slightly more accurate, but probably the biggest benefit is that in leveling this way with the strings on, I can stop as soon as I'm happy that I've cleared up the buzzing that we had before. And so I'll be able to hear it pretty much straight away, hear it and feel it. Now what I just did there is I set 3 points of the 3 little brass thingies, which are all the same size, and I put them at 3 different points on this curve. Now this curve is an imperfect curve, right? If you looked at it under a plec machine, one of those fancy guitar setup machines, it would show you that the neck sort of goes a bit like this along its way, so it looks like the seabed. It would be exaggerated, but in other words, it's not a perfectly smooth curve. And what I do is I'm using 3 points to sample the curve, and I replicate the curve, or I approximate the curve is probably a better way of putting it. I simulate the curve with this device here, which is a truss rod that curves when I bend it. Because it's not made of organic wood and stuff, it tends to curve more regularly or evenly, more purely if you like, than the wood of this compressed neck curves. So when I make a curve that touches these 3 points equally, okay, I have simulated the curve, but actually this is more ideal than that. That is in reality like the bottom of the sea. This is like a smooth metal shape that's sort of basically kind of describing the curve but not taking into account the little hump here and the hump there. And because of that, when we level the frets with this, it goes in and it levels out those odd little peaks and troughs. It's very sophisticated but simple in the same way. I'd call it elegant. So what I do is I move off the bass string off the fingerboard, and I now get my truss rod leveling tool, or the banana as I call it, which has got 400 grit sandpaper or wet and dry paper on the underside of it. And what I do is I go up and down on the frets, and I can hear it and see it just beginning to sand the frets down a little bit. Now we know that at the edge, often the frets are sticking up a little bit at the edge, which is why they can be noisier on the bass, sometimes on the bass ones, but often at both edges. And that can be for a number of reasons, including a slight mismatch between the frets that have been put in and the fingerboard and its radius. But I've done a little bit of leveling straight away. I can see straight away, if I get the close-up cam, I could pull this round. No, that would be too bouncy. I could pull it off. I'll just use it like this. Close-up cam will show me some things. It's a great diagnostic tool if I just get the focus right. So it tells me a bit of cutting, more cutting, bit less, not so much at all, some, hardly any, none at all, right? That's a low fret in this sequence of frets, a relatively low fret, if I can align it. Now there's a patch here, there's a low one again, nothing's scraped the top of that yet, hardly anyway. Some cutting there, not much there, none there, and none there. 2 low frets in the sequence. So the point is, what you're seeing there is this kind of up and down business. So I told you about it's the unevenness of the seabed that you're actually seeing. And to the naked eye, it looks like a straight neck with a tiny bit of a curve in it, and you'd sort of assume that the curve was uniform, but it isn't. And there is, there I can tell you now, there is a slight dip there. There's probably a prominent fret sticking up here. And it doesn't actually matter when you're fret leveling. It doesn't matter whether the frets you're looking at are lower than others, because a low fret makes the next one high. So it's all relative. So if you find a fretboard with some low frets in it, that's going to cause you the same problem as if you had an even fretboard and a couple of frets sticking way out. The low spot makes the next one high. A high one makes the spot high. So what this tool shows me straight away is that we've got some unevenness, and it's taken the high bits off the high frets, the relatively high frets, and it hasn't reached the bottom of the low troughs yet. We don't always have to go to the very bottom. What we just have to do is pick the guitar up, which you can't do with the other fret leveling methods. And notice how much cleaner, not there, but down at this end it is, still some problems here. And I think that's why. That's because there are those low frets here, 3 here, possibly 1 there, and a couple more back here. So to get rid of this, we do need to continue working on that part of the neck. I call it the E track, It's the place, the sort of track that the E string sits in. You know, and it's a bit wider than the string. Obviously, you can see I'm kind of going from side to side to cover all of the E track, and that's an organic thing. It's not microscopically accurate. I'm just kind of going from side to side a little bit, and then I'll do the same when I get into the A track, and each track will overlap a little bit, and generally you'll get a fairly smooth radius. Now I'm listening out for much better, a little tiny bit there. So you see how much better that's become just in the short time I've been doing that. And that isn't, I'm not leveling out specific high or low frets here. What I'm doing is I am, with this amazing ideal curve of the banana, as they call it, what I'm doing is I'm cleaning up the imperfect curve formed by all of these frets on this strangely compressed neck. And to do that, I'm hardly taking any material off at all, right? But I am cleaning it up in such a way that it now becomes much more like an ideal curve, and so that we lose that, most of that buzz, a little tiny bit. A little bit still there, a little bit there. So we've got a little kind of cluster around this 12th fret now. So you see how we're getting there, and although I'm going back 2, 3, 4 times in total to this track, what I'm doing is altogether I'm not taking an awful lot of material. Now I'm sort of focusing a little bit on this area by the 12th fret. When I say focusing, what I really mean is I'm just kind of gently pressing a little tiny bit harder and putting my energy into that spot there, because there seems to be a last little bit of area of resistance. Look at that. Tiny bit up there. But you see how much better that's got straight away, and that's the beauty of this method. You can actually hear it. We're going to do a fraction more at that top bit now, and we're done. That's how good this method is compared to any other method I've ever used. Now, I don't take credit for this. This is a system invented on a tool that you could buy commercially, and for various ludicrous reasons I can't use that, because the inventor took a disliking to me personally and made my life quite difficult, despite me praising his invention. Despite me having paid 150 quid for it and praising it in my videos, he didn't like the words I was using. I thought he could tell me what I could and couldn't say, which is not the case in a commercial free world. Anyway, but as a result of that, I found myself unable to use that tool, but certainly convinced about the method. And then it seemed a pretty simple affair to reproduce or innovate or improvise, that's the word. To improvise the tool using just a basic common garden truss rod taken from an old neck, a piece of rubber and 3 brass feet. And lo and behold, I have got a perfectly working version, which I've used ever since. And I show people in my ebook 5 Steps to Guitar Setup Heaven, show how to make and use this tool. And this tool, for all manners of reasons that I've mentioned already, is superbly elegant. It tells me straight away what's happening with the neck. And if I trust it and listen to it, or read its signs, if I trust it and read its signs, I get better and better results out of it. Now, that's what I really like about it. It's elegant in how it works, but also how it diagnoses, or how it works as a diagnostic to show you things about the neck that you can't see with the naked eye. And that whole business of how it curves is the uneven seafloor analogy is one of them. You'd never be able to see that with your naked eye. A tiny bit more in that bottom part of the E, or the A. could you get as accurate with the conventional fret leveling methods? Well, no, not quite, because of the business of the compression, longitudinal compression, that you don't get in the conventional leveling methods. It just isn't there, so you can't reproduce it, and you basically reintroduce it afterwards. Let me just check the height of this one, because this seems resistant to clearing up. What have we got? We're just on, possibly even a fraction low. What am I looking for? That one. Yeah. So the other method doesn't level with the compression effects in play. And then when you string up the guitar, then you reintroduce those effects, and the frets do slightly odd things, or just move slightly in ways that you haven't anticipated. And so I prefer it for that reason. But I think the main thing is in that you get to where you want to get to, i.e. the action you want the guitar to play at, with the minimum overall loss of fret metal. Now there always is some fret metal loss in the guitar when you're doing the leveling the frets. It's simple as that. You can't level the frets without removing metal. Why do guitars have uneven frets in the first place, you might ask? Well, it's because they are crudely manufactured. Simple as that, really. They're 1800s technology. Right? Metal frets hammered into soft, organic, changeable wood. Temperamental wood. You don't know what it's going to do from one minute to the next, depending on the climate change or the temperature or whatever. So it's imprecise at the best of times, simple as that. You're starting with an organic, imprecise, crude method, and as simple as that. Nobody can lay mathematically perfect set of frets. I think when I refret guitars, I might get 1 in 25 that just happens to be good enough to play almost straight away without leveling the frets any further. Nigh on impossible. So, and I don't even consider it a mark of success or failure if I have to level. It's just what you have to do. But yeah, it's old technology without a doubt. I'm expecting not to have to level as much over on this side now, because I found that the treble side of this guitar was better overall. We're also getting a little bit of change. So what you're seeing I'm doing is I'm recalibrating the tool as the indicators here, the brass things, tell me that the neck relief has slightly increased on this side. Now you think that's a bit weird. How can neck relief change between two parts of the guitar neck? Well, it does. Part of it being changeable and organic and imprecise. It has different settings. It's not mathematically straight and precise. So now I'm doing the G track, and I'm hoping that we don't need quite so much leveling on this. We should find this plays pretty well. Just a couple of notes down there, which I will pay a tiny bit more attention to, but that's almost it. So yeah, that's why I work with this method all the time. Simple and crude though it is. I still have the tool in the other room on the shelf. Actually, I found it the other day. I don't use it because the man was so rude. He doesn't deserve promotion. Had he, I mean, the idiotic thing, had he not been an absolute unstable, rude git in the first place, I would have carried on glowingly promoting his tool and getting him sales. But he was so unpleasant that there was no chance I was going to do that. but I still acknowledge that I learned this method from that tool. But having been put in a position where I couldn't use it, it was too unpleasant to use it, what I was left with was the need to do it this way. For all the reasons that I've worked out since and more. So, I improvise my own. And I suppose ultimately when you come full circle on it, you have to question how strong a business model is for somebody who is basing their only hope of success on being able to patent something that somebody else can copy or improvise using tools that cost nothing, next to nothing. So it can't be that good. It can't be that strong a business model if it's depending on nobody copying it at home with a truss rod from an old neck. So my approach is costs practically nothing by comparison, and works elegantly and has done dutifully for the last 6 years or more. Wouldn't change it. Great. Yeah. Okay, we don't care that it's out of tune now. So that's great. That's leveled the frets. There's a bit of dust around. I don't know. Let's have a look on the close-up. Hey, close-up cam. Bit of dust built up that's come from filing the frets or leveling the frets with the 400 grit. It always looks worse than it is. One of the things you have to learn when you use this method is you have to kind of become a little bit bolder. You can find yourself thinking you're going wrong when in fact it's working perfectly well. And I personally have suffered from chickening out syndrome far too much in my time. I've always backed off before I should, with the result that sometimes people get a guitar back with some more buzz in it than I would like to have given them. But now in this case I'm going to leave the strings on. I'm just going to slack them off now because now's the time to take care of this nut replacement. This probably would play all right, this material. I think it's Thoman's version of artificial bone. I'm not quite sure. You never can completely tell. If so, it's great that they put it on an inexpensive guitar. It cuts a bit mushily, but then so does tusk actually when you get going. So a bit hard to tell. Anyway, point here is I'm going to remove this because we're going to do replace it with a custom tusk nut. Now, for the purpose of tapping off the original nut, I had around me a set of little screwdrivers for the purpose, little sharp things, and I'll get a little hammer. And then what I'm going to do is once I've taken that off, I'm going to take a little break to make a cup of tea and wash my hands. I used to have hot water in here, but the pipes froze the other day due to cold weather, and my landlord, the site owner, hasn't yet got round to repairing it, which is okay. I've still got water. Okay, this is plastic. I was not surprised really, and it's shown its true quality by breaking in the slot, but that's okay. We'll just gently help it out. Okay, so having taken the plastic out, it's workable. It's a sort of a slightly mushy plastic, which I don't mind too much. If you've got nothing else, I would say cut your nut slots down to the correct length in that material. That's the thing to do, and it'll work for you. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. And if you do the slots with something like that V file that I showed you, the aficionados will come turn in their grave, and if they see you making nut slots with a cheap Chinese jeweler's file. But actually it's a perfect thing to use, and it does the job absolutely just right. Now I'm just tying the strings out of the way, because while I'm here, what I want to do is just clear out very carefully clear out any glue. Sorry, I'm getting right in your way. It's not possible to do this without getting in your way at some point. I'm just going to basically scrape out any glue that's obviously standing up in obstructing this slot, because to get the new nut in and seated, you want it as clear as possible. Now, because it's going to stand on little feet, the good thing about it is we don't have to, it doesn't have to be, actually we can be less concerned about the quality of the flat surface at the bottom of the slot. If you're making a nut that's going to sit on that material dead flat, then you have to be more concerned about it. But in my case, I'm going to be using these little adjustable grub screws, which means I don't have to be so finicky. Now what I can see straight away, and perhaps I shouldn't have chucked the other one in the bin, let me get the fragment of this one. What I'm seeing is my replacement nut is a fraction thicker than the one that's come out. So I'm just going to check by how much. That's registering dead on 3. This is now 3.2. So we have a little bit of sanding to get this to fit in the direction I want it to fit. So I'll do that bit first using a sanding block. If I seem old and croaky, it's because I'm old and croaky. My back is tired and hurty. Okay, so I'm going to file a little bit, and where am I going to take it from? It's interesting. That is actually a slanted. That's really weird. I never noticed that before. That slants up from the base. So if you start sanding it here, you get a different shape altogether. So I'm just very gently sanding this so it will fit. We're almost there straight away. It's a very, very small amount of adjustment. I just want to get this smooth. And it's going to go in this way. So really I need it to sit smoothly, cleanly in the slot, just so that I can raise it up and down on those grub screws I'm going to be using as its feet. Interesting how they used left-handed. The Chinese manufacturers generally do that. They I keep regularly buy these left-handed nuts, and they fit them with right-handed. I buy right-handed necks, and I buy left-handed headstock necks for left-handed guitars, and they always come from the factory fitted with a right-handed nut. They don't seem to think there's a difference. Bless them. Okay, so we're sort of pretty much there. That's actually as much movement as I want. That's a good fit. Just check the underside of it. That feels good too. Right, now the next bit I've got to do is a precision job. And I'm going to mark up the nut. It's going to be this way round, as we know. I'm going to mark up the place where the two grub screws are going to sit. And I do this by eye, because I've done it a few times. And I sort of mark the centre points. Now what I have to do is I have to get an initial mark into, I can show you on the close-up thing. It sort of looks a bit like, hello there, a bit like this. Can you focus in? Yeah, there you go. That's an old one from some time before, but it ends up looking like that. The idea being you have adjustable grub screws. I'm just going to turn you around so you can actually see what's going on. Why is that? Why is that moved? Sorry about this. Oh, that's because I've moved the darn guitar, isn't it? Ooh, you silly chap. So once that goes back to the right place, it'll go back to the right place. Okay, worry about it not. Okay, so that's how it'll end up looking. I have to make an initial kind of impact in this, and sometimes I have different ways of doing it. Sometimes I'll tap it and make the initial impact. Sometimes I will do something else. I will put it in the vise and try it, make that mark. It's kind of just needs a start point to be in the right place, and then we can make a hole. The trouble is it tends to slip if you don't have it held. I'll do it. I'm going to go across to the what's it and put it in the vise and do it there. This bit's got to be right, so I'm not going to take any chances. Sorry that you can't see this bit, but I'll get it done. We can even edit this out if I can be bothered. I'll make these holes. I'll make up the nut first, and then I'll stop for break for tea. The nut goes in there like that. Hold it there. Hold it up there like that. Put it in there like so-ish. Okay, like that. Squeeze it like that. Okay. Put the thing in the thing like this. And then let's make a mark like this. Hole, good. Let's go off to one side. Don't want that. And just rescue that one back. Good. Okay, so I've made a pilot marker, start marking holes. Now I'm going to take that over to the pillar drill, and I'm going to very carefully, with the right bit, which since I can't find, I may have to grab one from somewhere. I've got a load of them kicking about, but I always forget where they are. Yeah, I'm going to use a 1.5mm bit, and then I'm going to tap the threads. Sorry, I'm right in your face, but I won't cut to that, just for your sake. I'll punish you. I'm going to stick these back somewhere in here. They need to be safely stored. Right, take the little 1.5-inch bit, and I'm going to go across to my wonderful friend, the pillar drill. I'm going to take another bit of wood to do the job. And I'm going to basically drill those holes down through the whole nut. Thank you. You're plugged in, you should be able to go. Finally got round to buying myself a vise for the drill to hold things. Nearly took my thumbs off with a piece of workpiece spinning around, trying to, piece of brass actually, spinning around trying to kill me. Right, let's have a quick look. Is that properly tightened up? I'm not sure if that looks dead. Fitted perfectly well. This is it's the best pillar drill I've had, but it's still not a top quality one, although I'm very grateful for it. It was donated to me by my stepbrother. I couldn't live without it, but it's not, when I go down and have the opportunity to use Rod's pillar drill, it's like a dream. The precision of it is absolutely wonderful. Okay, before I do that, I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to just tidy up this little proud bit of tusk sticking up here, and I'm just going to do the same on that side. And then I'm going to get this little device here called a countersink, and I'm just going to use that to deepen that hole under control, so hopefully it'll receive the drill bit a little bit better. The reason I'm taking the time with this is if the drill bit, when your drill bit touches a slopey surface, which this nut has, the danger is that it will kind of push sideways And what you'll end up with is a hole that's pushing sideways and comes out. This has got to come out dead centre at the bottom. So I've got to get that first bite spot on so that the drill goes freely and centrally through. Good, both on target. Yeah, that was slightly putting me off a little bit because the base of the nut wasn't perfectly flat, so it was trying to rock a little bit. So next I get my trusty, kind of slightly wonky now, countersink, and there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can come from underneath, which is the flatter surface, get our first bite and go through on that, which is kind of probably easier to do, and then exit through the slopey top. So it's nice and soft material. I've done this before with bone, and bone tends to break or can split. Tusk never seems to. It's got the good all-round resistance to this sort of modification, which is great, which is perfect. But there you go. So I've put that one through there. Now we have to just redo it backwards so it's off. And then to get another set of these. This is good, but I would like a bit more precise one. The way they hold the countersink, the tap bits, whatever they call them. The way they hold them is a bit crude for my liking. And maybe there's no other better type, but I can have a dream that there is. Okay, so this is making the threads for the two little grub screws. Now the next thing I'll do, I'll talk you through what I do before I have my tea break. I'm going to eventually, I will slightly flatten off the base of the grub screws, but not before I've used them to mark where in the slot the nut sits, and then I make hand drill, or just make an impression with the drill bit of the two screws, grub screws feet, so that when it's sat in there it won't move from side to side. So it just locates in that in those little dents that I'll make. But it's very kind of precise, but it's very effective. So I get myself two little grub screws and a tiny hex key that comes with it. Now Pat, you'll get one of these. You probably never think about it again, but when you get it, I'll tape it to the pick guard on the guitar, and you'll want to put it somewhere safe. And if you ever need it again and you haven't got one, I'll have a spare somewhere. But it's here so that you can, at any point in the future, you can adjust your nut up and down, and that gives you a choice of your first fret action. You can have a bit more room if it suits you that way, or you can have less if it suits you. Okay, there's the first one in. Here's the second one. So I'm going to mark the foot points, I'm going to put this in and tap it down when it's lined up. Tap it down so that I can make two little dents in the slot, which may not be that easy to see. Now I have to go this side because it's back to front nut in this case. Okay, so now I line it up where I want it, compared to where the Chinese would have their nut. There's the first one, 1 and 2. So that's 2 little dents. Perfect. I can see them. What I can do is I can just exaggerate them a tiny bit for my own eyeballs, so I can see what I'm working with. Quite dense, this, quite strong, this wood. They claim for it that it's a very hard wearing fingerboard. Which I've no doubt is true. Okay, so what I can do is I can either use, and start off with a smaller one, and I basically just locate it in that little pinprick I made, and I just turn it by hand, and it will just cut itself a little bit into that gap, and then I go in with the slightly bigger one and I just do the same couple of turns by hand in that same little dent, and blow the cobwebs away. Now that has no impact at all on anything. What it means is when I do come to put the nut in here, okay, it will locate itself right into that space and it won't move. Now I'm putting the hex key, yeah, the little hex key over there that I'll need, or that I'll need to send with the guitar when Pat gets it, and I'm going to do the last little tiny bit to the adjustable nut before breaking 15. And the last thing I'm going to do, oh look, I'm moving it out of the way again, is I'm going to take this out. I'm going to use the little hex key again, and I'm going to just pull back these little hex keys just until they're protruding from the surface of the underside, only just. Then with my block on fine setting, I'm going to very carefully, holding the thing in straight lines, very carefully going to wear down those points until they're ideally, flush with the tusk. It's quite hard to hold, but it gets there in the end. Alright, so now I've got 2 flat bottom grub screws. I'm just going to protrude it a little bit more to get the rest of it done, and then I'll be done. Now that means that they'll still go into those little depressions and locate, but because they're flat bottomed, what they won't do is cut into the wood and go any further down. Okay, so I'll add a little bit of wind it on through-in-us and put it in there, and then there we have it, not going anywhere. Now what I've now got to do is I've got to in a minute, after tea, I will recut the slots to run the correct direction, since we're using a right-handed nut to begin with. In a sense, Harley Benton could have done this with their right-handed nut, but obviously it's a bit of a time consumer, so they understandably haven't. The only downside of using this tape is it tends to get stuck to things. Right, so what I would want to do is I would want to, just to begin with, I'm going to replace all my strings. Just let go of me green tape, please. Please, please. Okay. Under the spring tree of love. I'll change those in a second as well while we're at it. So you notice that at this point in time I haven't done anything with the frets since I levelled them. I've just put them on hold for a minute while we're doing sort of structural work. But we'll come back to those frets in a minute. Okay, so now I have a situation which is just where I want it to be. I've got the nut in there, and it's actually keeping the strings too high above the first fret, but that's fine, because what I don't want is I first of all want to wind this out now at this point so that the grub screws are not lifting the nut at all. I want the nut to be sat as flat on the ground as it can sit. And we're going to put it under full tuning pressure now. Now from this point, what I want to do is I want to cut the slots down just until the strings are sitting on the first fret. And that's my target. The alternative is I could cut it down from underneath. But that's a long drawn out thing. I'd probably have to take the if I did, I'd have to take the grub screws down with it. What shall I do? Do you know what? I'm just no, they're back. No, I've got to do it this way because they're back to front, aren't they? Stupid me. If this was right-handed and I was reusing a nut just for the hell of it, I would do it from the bottom up. Okay, yes, because I've got to make this run backwards, I've got to change the shape of these slots. I do need to do this back to front. So what I'll do is I'll do all of this and then I'll have tea. So I don't need to worry about my 0.3 now. What I really want is I want to take this down slightly backwards until I get strings sitting onto as close as possible on the first fret. So if I can hear it play, it's still too high up. So I just carefully wear it down until it hits that first fret. Very close. You can see it's reasonably easy to sort of track it as it goes down because you'll hear it as soon as it bottoms out. Now, in doing this, I may just clip the back of the wood just behind the nut, but that's to be understood. So this is a very, very small amount. It doesn't leave an awful lot of nut material above the line here. It's incredibly low. These frets and these nuts end up being incredibly thin if you don't want a massive slot in them, which I certainly don't. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop with that one. So that's pretty much where I want it. And this one I'll do the same. Just carefully extending that. Now this diamond coated jeweler's file does this cutting business really beautifully well. It never gets blunt. It just keeps on cutting, and it's sort of really predictable earth mover files in my book. So again, I'll just go down until I start hearing this clattering against the first fret, and I'll know to stop then. All you have to be, if you're doing this, all you have to be conscious of is to keep that slot smooth. Tiny bit more, only a tiny bit more. Yeah, you've got to keep the groove, the slot you're cutting nice and regular so that the string sits in it beautifully. It's almost there. As it goes deeper, it tends to have more material to move because it's kind of working in a big slot, on a big notch, but it has a better all-round effect than trying to do it with a tall, regular nut file. I've used those in the past for a long time and it just doesn't work out in the end. But the only one I sometimes will get the files out for is the low E one, which sometimes needs an extra little bit of rounding out at the bottom, like that. But still, that's still too high above the fret. Nearly there, but not quite. So once I get them all roughly to that place, almost there. As long as I can hear them clattering, I'm just about there. I don't need to keep going until they're actually against the fret, because all I need is enough room to bring the nut up to where I want it to be, and that's going to be perfectly possible to do from here. That's good. So I'm going to drop off these top three now and work my way in. So let's put that on there. Okay. So again, back to the jeweler file. In truth, if you worry about the shape of the slot at the bottom when you use this kind of file, you'll pretty much find out that it's because you're moving it a little bit, and because it's not actually that microscopically sharp when you look at this tool, you'll find that it doesn't actually get in the way. It doesn't create a problem. Almost there, you see. Pull this slightly to one side. Now, what I can do, and what I sometimes do, and I'd advise in my ebook, is if you do it with this kind of file, which anyone can find, 10 a penny, or they're about £1 or something in a set of about 8 different files, you can do all of the hard work with this, and then if you have some old nut files that maybe don't work anymore, or somebody doesn't want, or you got cheap, or even you've got one of those welding nozzle things, you can just, if you get the welding nozzle cleaners, you can use those pretty effectively. I'm going to just do this last little one here with this. That's currently sounding dead because it's not high enough and it's not got any angle, but as soon as we lift it up it'll sound better. The problem with guitars is sometimes the makers constrain you by accident on the action you can set. I know Harley Benton did it a few times with guitars where, Les Paul type guitars, where they basically set the neck angle and the bridge in such a way that you couldn't actually lower the bridge any further after a certain point, which meant you were stuck with either filing the bridge down if you wanted to get any lower, or that's about it. You couldn't really find another kind of bridge that did it. Okay, we're sort of almost there with all of these. I'm just going to do a little bit of cutting in there for this string. Okay, everything just about touching. So what I now want to do is bring it up a little bit to playing action. And what we'll end up with is something that's actually quite a lot taller than it needs to be. So we can basically, either keep on going up, or we can slack this back off and have it sit down first, and we can take the grub screws out at this point and we'll sand the nut down to clean it up. So what I'll do is now we've got the strings at the right depths, they're all just about touching the first fret, which means when we lift it up they'll all go up to the same height. I'm just going to take these hex grub screws out for a second. Then we get some sanding sticks. Those are the most effective ones. And then we do this. We sand that old right-handed nut down as if it were a left-handed nut. So we reintroduce a nice slope in the right direction. And also at the same time as we just remove all the unnecessary material above where the strings sit, because none of that's doing any good to anyone. It's just dead material. And so we tidy it up like this. Now on these, you might hear it's sort of starting to hit these sacrificial strings, which is absolutely fine. We're using them as a sort of guide just to tell us where we're getting to. What we can also do is round off the ends too, so that they don't have sharp bits that we don't need. Okay, so that's nice and low. Then we can get the next grade of sanding thing, and we can continue in the same way but a bit smoother now, and so we end up with a much nicer finish. And if we want, we can polish it out with some finer sandpaper as well. In fact, you can go as far as you want until it shines if you feel like it. So that's nice. That's looking. How well you can see that. That's a really neat little nut now. There's a tiny bit over at this end here, which I will now mask off and take away. I'm going to have my tea after I finish this part of the job, I promise you. So I'm just going to cover this off. And here and here. And a little bit here. Then I'm going to get a small file. It's probably not, where is that? Aha, I had one the other day. Question is where I put it. I had the perfect file for this. It was a fret rocker that I'd converted to such a file. Here it is. The perfect. It was narrow, but it was a harsh grit, so this was perfect for scraping it away. Yes, nice. Now I'm kind of going slightly up downhill first, and then I come back to the rest of it, just smooth it out. Now it's nice and flush, and then I can finish it a bit more with this lower grit thing, and then we're pretty much there. So it's a nice way of just tidying up that end. A few little bits there that will come off in a minute when we take the strings out. Okay, so that's the nut pretty much done. And I will obviously replace the grub screws now. And now, when you with an adjustable nut like this, it's possible that once you take the strings off, it's possible that it can ping. Is this the right size for this? It's possible that it can ping off and fly away. No, it's too big. And so what I advise is that when you come to change your strings, fit new strings, you do it. This has now got some gunge in the way. I recommend that you do it by fitting your middle strings first to hold the nut down, and similarly when you're taking the strings off, you take from the outside inwards, leaving your middle strings to the last. Okay, that's in place. Just being a little careful there, because I flattened the ends of these grub screws, they were sort of trying to drag in a bit of dust into the hole with them. I didn't quite want to bite the thread. So be a little bit careful. You won't obviously take the grub screws out in future for any reason, so it won't be a problem. But there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to raise them up to the target playing action, which is about there. Fab. Okay, now, believe it or not, is the time to remove the strings. Now, at this point, I'm also going to be taking a close watch of these tuners to see whether that grinding or slightly crunchiness is going to be a problem. I hope not, but right, before I go any further, let's do one more thing while the strings are on here. Actually, I want them fairly a little bit more tightened up. Oh no, don't need to do anything. The holes are already made. Oh. I was thinking I had to make holes, in which case I would have left the strings in and used them to mark holes for the tusk string trees. But the holes are already there. Nearly there. Right. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll get rid of these, and I think we will best, I think it's a false economy not to put tusk string trees on. I hate it when you put loads of time into getting the nut right and getting tuning stability, and then all that happens is you get you end up with metal string trees, and you can hear the strings pinging off them as they go through. Horrible. So there's my custom tusk nut. You see how it comes up? We can clear off the little loose bits and give the whole thing a clean under there. Okay, well that's interesting. What's come through there? Is that? I think that's a little bit of, yeah, it's a little bit of nut dust has been dragged through underneath the grub screws. There we are. Okay. So there's our remade nut, correct way around. Okay, so I can either leave it there or I can put it somewhere safe. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a set of these, a pair of these. They're 12 something a pair. Well, they used to be £12 a pair, but everything, I'm afraid, is going up at the moment. I'm not going to get into the Brexit business, but let's just say everything is going up in price. Everything is increasing. So somehow either I absorb the cost, or eventually I have to pass it on eventually. I can't absorb the cost forever. It's a real shame, but there's nothing I can really do about it. At the moment I haven't put my prices up, but I'm now paying a lot more for parts than I did, and I go through a ton of parts, as you can see. Things like strings. A couple of years ago strings would have been £5 a pack maximum. You're now lucky if you get change from 20 for 3 sets of strings. It used to be much better price than that. Okay, so there's the tusk string trees. At the moment there's dust and stuff building up down here, but that's fine because it's got cellophane on it, which I will wait for the very end to take off, because although it's nice giving people guitars with cellophane still on it in some ways, in another way it's pretty horrible because it never comes off easily and it ends up caught underneath knobs and switches, and it makes a scrunchy sound and becomes really annoying. So I will take it all off before I hand this over, but I'll leave it on while I'm doing dirty work. Right, so I need to wash my hands and get a cup of tea. So here we have, oh no, I'll do one more, just one more thing. What I'll do is I will recrown the frets. After that, and after I've had my tea, I will tidy everything up, and I will off camera polish out the frets on this, which is a boring, time-consuming process that just involves a lot of sandpaper and some micro mesh sheets, and I'll run through a series of grades from 400 grit right the way through 12,000 to polish out these frets and to make them all shiny, and more importantly to keep them the right shape and not to alter their height, so that the relative levelness that I've just worked for and got is still maintained or preserved. But that's a slow process, it's noisy and time consuming, so it's just, I prefer to do it off camera. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just re-crowning the frets that I've levelled to make sure that they're arch shaped, or fret shaped if you like, And I've got the marker pen on top so that I can round off their flattened edges, but I can see, as long as I leave a little black line of pen on top, I can see that I haven't lowered the overall height of the fret, which is important. And there goes my nut jumping off. So it's about maintaining that relative levelness that we've already just achieved. So that's what it's for. Most of these frets hardly need any crowning work, because actually it goes to show how little material we actually took off them. So it really kind of gives you an indication when you come to this stage how little or how much you had to actually remove. So going all the way down, and after that I go through a process of taping off the whole fingerboard to protect it, and while I get ready to sand it all out. And I end up the sanding process with a polish out with a Dremel and a little buffing wheel and some Autosol chrome cleaner, chrome polish, and that will be the sort of last step in the fret polishing department. I'm using this brush here just to declog the file of this marker pen as I go through. It seems to work just that bit better if I don't have the pen kind of loading the grains of diamond dust or whatever it uses. Okay, so for anyone interested, what are the essential differences between setting up a left-handed and a right-handed guitar? And I think the thing I would say is, because you can't sort of play intuitively or instinctively, naturally play a left-handed guitar if you're a familiar right-handed player, then the downside of a left-handed setup for you is that you can't evaluate it the same way as you can a right-handed guitar setup. There's one more thing I'm going to do here, by the way. Two more. Amongst our two more things, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use 180 grit. I'm going to tape off some protective stuff here for a minute. I'm going to use some fairly chunky grit to just polish, round off the fret ends here on both sides. So I just want to, where it comes anywhere near to the end of the guitar, sorry, end of the neck, I want to just make sure I've got these bits clean, taped off, so that the sandpaper I'm using can't do any harm. I'm gonna have more paper on it by the time I rope all this up as well, but this is sort of double protection. Now when that happens, you tend to pull off the coating. That's the other downside, but I'll kind of leave all of this on until close to the end. Right, so to soften off I'll come back to the differences between left and right hand guitars, but what I'm going to do just now is to soften off the edges of these frets. I'm just going to manhandle this. I'm going to make myself a flat block of paper. It's quite heavy grit, and I'm going to go across the end of these frets. Now this both picks up any sharp bits on the frets, but it also slightly rounds the fingerboard in between as well, which makes it a little bit more comfortable. So we take off the sprout. Now the reason these necks sprout is that they manufacture these from wood that's probably not completely dry, or as dry as we would like for our uses in musical instruments, but nevertheless, you know, they make them cheaply. There's no doubt about that. And so the necks are probably still drying out when you get them out of the box, and or when you hang them up on the wall in your home. And over the next month or two, they almost always lose that little bit extra moisture, and what you end up with is a thing called fret sprout, which this guitar has got, or had got, and that's where, because the fingerboard shrinks back a little bit, in shrinking back it's only a microscopic amount, but in doing so it leaves the the end of the fret, which was kind of precisely cut with a file that cuts them all even or level with each other. As soon as they're exposed, as the wood recedes, they actually act like little chisels, and that's why you can feel them straight away, even though there's virtually nothing to measure overhanging. You couldn't put a number to it. It's so infinitesimally small, but because it behaves like a little chisel, your fingers notice it immediately, and it feels sharp and uncomfortable. So the only way we can deal with that is to do what I'm doing here. Some of the stuff caught in the fingerboard there. Do what I'm doing here, which is to sand it over again and just remove the sharp edges, basically cutting into your soft, delicate little fingers. Now what I did was I did a sort of flat end first to try and take away the little razor chisel point. And now what I'm doing is a sort of rounded little tube of sandpaper just to let it roll up and over all of the ends, so that it softens them a little bit. Okay, that's not too bad. Right, so there I am with my nut done, ready to go. My frets levelled, reprofiled, and the edges softened off. Now I will get them all masked off, stop the cameras, and we'll be cup of tea time. I'll come back to you when it's time to restring, and finish the setup. Okie dokie, here we are back with the fretboard polished, or the frets polished out, cleaned out with the water sol and everything. You know, the more I look at this wood, the more I like it actually. It has a feel, I know it isn't, but it has a feel of ebony about it. It's got a long grain. It's got visible grain underneath all that darkness, and I think it's not bad. Whatever it is, it may not even be a manufactured thing, fake thing. Not really that important, but it feels pretty good. Whatever it is, it's very smooth, like in the way that ebony is quite waxy smooth. So it doesn't have the patterns or the warmth of rosewood, and it's not as unpleasant as that tech blackwood stuff that I've got on a few things here in the workshop. Actually, it's just all round. It's a nicer. Maybe let's see if you can see the grain in this one in the light. Oh, quick, see? I'm quite impressed with that. Whatever it is, see when the oil's still sitting on there. Anyway, yeah, good use of the close-up camera, he said, dropping it back crudely in place. Doink. Right, okay, so that was about half an hour of polishing done and out of the way. And what I'm going to quickly do now is I'm going to just put some stuff on briefly on my hands to clean them up. Back with you in a second. Just get the last bits of fret dust off my fingers before we get on to the fun bit, which is stringing her up. Okay, so what have we done? Well, we have we've done everything. Let's recap. Started off by checking the current action and picking out what I could tell was right and wrong with the guitar, and not bad at all. I have a little bit of work to do in terms of levelling, which I kind of got on and did. Let me just get where's it gone? What else? I've lost my thing now. I just tidied this right out of the way. Yep, I think I have. Yeah, so what did we do? We levelled the frets, make the nut, and then I'm not thinking straight. What did we do? We checked it all over, made sure there was enough relief in the neck, which there just about was, and then checked the action, first and last fret, and altered it, and then checked out how it played at that new action, and found that it had a bit of fret buzz down on the lower strings. But apart from that, it wasn't too bad. But there was a choke out on one of the higher bends on the E as well, which, to be precise, I like to get right and level it out. And so we leveled the frets out, and you saw in the process of leveling how the banana fret leveling tool is able to not only level high spots and balance out high and low spots, but you saw that it was also able to ease up that sort of fret slapping where the strings kind of buzz a lot of the way up. Now remember I said, pay attention 007, Pat, when it comes to stringing, put all your strings in, if you like. First of all, they go in the back. This bridge, by the way, is designed for both through body stringing and top mounted stringing, but this guitar doesn't have through body holes, so you can only mount from the top. So the strings go in the back here, through this little hole at the back, and then you come up and over the saddle. And I'm putting them all on, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put on the middle two first, the G and the D, to keep the nut in place, so I don't want the nut pinging off and flying around the room somewhere where I might lose it. Because if you lose it, then it'll have to come back to me for another one. So remember to do this. So in putting it on, you put the middle strings on first, and in taking strings off, you take the middle ones off last. On first, off last. So you go in through the back here, little holes all in line with the little notches, and then we'll take 3. We'll start with this one, which has got a name, and it's called the D. And it's this one. Now what am I doing? I'm trying to put the wrong thing on the string tree, which doesn't go on one. Okay, so when I string this up, what I tend to do is I pull the string all the way through and hold it, pull it back 1 fret, and then hold it, and then I start tightening it up. And you want the strings always to tighten onto or go onto the spool from the inside. So this is the inside, that's the outside. Right, so to the inside, and then we want the string on the first time round, we want the held string to go over the loose string, and as it comes round we pull up the loose string, and watching where the nut is, we then direct the held string down underneath the loose string this time around, and then we make sure it goes into the slot on the nut where it needs to be, and we just double check that's in place, okay, before hooking it under the string tree. Now then we look for the G, and we'll put the G on the next one. Now I'm also looking out to see how creaky those tuners are or not. So again, hold it, just put it all the way through and then pull it back 1 fret's worth. And then hold it, let the loose string go under the held string first, and then as it comes around, push the held string below the loose string. Let it go around that way for the second loop, and then it'll go into the slot on the nut and under the string tree at the same time. And then with those two in place, we've got the string tree, we've got the nut anchored down. And what I tend to do at that point is also lose the leftover string that we don't need, and that will only stick us in the fingers and cause us to bleed, as it always does. Next I'm going to do the B. Now when it comes to tuning, you've got a tuner which is okay for tuning up to play, but then nothing quite beats having a note to start with. And the good thing about the Roland Microcube that I bought for Pat is that it comes with a note on it to tune up to. Now you might not want to use that to tune all the way up, but it's a really good start point. And sometimes if you're new to playing or you're coming back into it from a long absence, one of the things you can get caught out with is finding yourself tuning to the wrong octave. And if you're new, it can be a really unsettling experience, because the first thing you'll do is you'll break a string as you think you're getting up towards the correct note, and you break a string, and because it can be one of the lower strings, it's quite catastrophic. I mean, it's a huge bang, and it might lash you in the face as the string comes round. It's pretty scary, but that's rare, but it can happen when you're not familiar with the octave that you're looking for. And because some tuners, well, not some tuners, all tuners will recognise that they're somewhere between a note and a note, and it will guide you upwards. Or you can be watching the tuner, and if you don't know that you're aiming for E3 or whatever, that I don't even know what it's numbered, but if you're just looking for E, the tuner will carry on telling you you're heading for E and to keep going upwards. And in fact, the E you really want is down below that note, because you're going up an octave high. So to avoid that risk, I always like to start my tuning with a note, a physical note in the real world. Physical isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. And that gives me a start point, and then I can fine tune everything from that using the tuner. Okay, and so and finally the high E. Now on the 9 set of strings, this is a delicate string and can break, but with a decent tusk nut like this, and with string trees made of tusk, we shouldn't have any real likelihood. There's nothing sharp in the line of the string now that should break it. Okay, so using around we go over the nut under the string tree. Okay, and then as this comes round, we'll cut that bit off. Right, so there's all our leftovers. Now the first thing I'm going to do when I've restrung, this is U-Pat restringing after a couple of months or weeks or whatever it is you want to restring. As you put the strings on, just a gentle tug upwards to seat them on, and if anything's perched on the edge of anything and catching, you'll find out now, because it will ping through as you gently tighten it. You don't want to go too hard now, because you run the risk of breaking if you do it too hard. So the next thing, Pat, this is my version of your amp. And I like to use this. I either use the tuning fork, or I use this, which has on there, you'll see it, it has, maybe I can, hey, can I cut to this in the close-ups? It's this button here. Now it can give 3 notes. Make sure it's pushed to the right to give the A. And with that A in mind, you find an A on your A string, and you look to tune it right. Interesting. What am I thinking? I tell you what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that's a strange spacing. Never noticed that. Right, hang on, I'll tell you about that in a minute. So that's the physical same note. And I know that from experience, but it's easier to hear that note and to tune the open string to that. You could keep going and look for another octave, but it'll break the string. Tuner is a bit crunchy. And what I'm doing here is called relative tuning. I'm tuning, it's a good way of doing it, tuning off the notes on one string. You hit the correct note on one string and tune it up, tune the other string to meet it. So if we've got one string that we know is in tune, like the E, so the A, which I'm now going to stretch it a bit. There's the A in tune. What we'll do with this is we will do the E string on the 5th fret should equal the A. So you can see E is flat at that. Next string, the A fretted on the 5th fret should be the same as the open D. Oh, wrong string. Sorry, my mistake. I'm working left-handed. Forgive me. Right. The A fretted on the 5th should equal the D. The D fretted on the 5th should equal the G. So tune the G to meet it. The only one place it changes, when you're on the G string, it changes to the 4th fret, should equal the open B. Then it goes back to B on the 5th fret, should equal the E octave. Okay, so I'll keep my tuner here for a minute because we'll need it just to double check. So now we've got the guitar roughly in tune. Play a left-handed guitar just. Right, so we've got the guitar roughly in tune, but if you remember what I said at the beginning, the tuning stability depends 50% on getting your nut right, which looking at it now looks pretty darn good, and 50% on getting your strings stretched out so there's no more slack inherent in the thing. And the way to do it is, and I recommend you do this, is when you change the strings, everybody, is you grab the strings between thumb and forefinger and you kind of walk along, pressing and pushing against thumb and forefinger to stretch that part of the string, and you change over and do it for every string. Now you'll get to feel how it's quite, you can do it quite hard on the wound strings without any damage, and what it's doing is at this point we're now putting it out of tune again, and it's doing that as I go through all these strings, including the plain ones. Now the plain ones are delicate, so you have to kind of be sure that you don't overdo it, but if you do it too lightly you won't get any benefit from stretching them. So it's all between the thumbs and forefingers to get the stretching action. Now I'm just looking at the moment, this string tree for the A is too high, and one of the reasons is there's another screw that comes with this, a lower screw, and I'm going to switch it out for the lower screw. I don't need the long screw, excuse the expression, for this part up here. I need the lower version, so I switched for the lower one, and I will reinstall it in the same hole, and just this time pull it down a bit. That's a better angle. The point of these string trees is to pull the strings over at enough of an angle for the notes to ring out. Okay, so I've done my first stretch and I put the amp on again, take a reference note. Again, gone through, tuned them up relative, or I think it's relative tuning it's called, using the 5th fret and then dropping to the 4th fret on the G string. And then I go through it again, stretching the strings. And you probably, ideally, would want to do this 3 or 4 times. And I'm going to do some other bends as well on top of that. But about 4 or 5 times by the time you've done this through and through, without, if you're lucky enough and you don't break the E string in the process, then you should be in a position where you stop detuning when you do that stretching. Now that's closer to being in tune, not so much slacking going on, but also what we're going to want to do here is, I do a few bends like this, and I kind of hold this end down so it doesn't stretch too much over the pivot point, and I sort of give it an extra stretch. Sometimes it busts a string, sometimes it doesn't. But the more you can stretch everything out before you start playing, the better it will be. See, we're almost there. We'd love to take you home. I don't really want to stop the show. That nearly sounded like a Sergeant Pepper chord there. Not bad for a left-hander. Okay, so that's it. There we are. Oh yes, one thing we have to do next. Once we've taken the stretch out of the strings, we can now be pretty confident that it will stay in tune. You'll still have to tune it when you get it out of the case or box or whatever. You'll put it in tune using your tuner, and then you'll play. But what you'll find now is it will stay in tune for way longer, and you'll have to make many fewer alterations. It's a way of saying it'd be much better. It stays in tune much better. What I'll do is I'll put the little hex key on its own bit of tape stuck to the scratch plate. Now I've taken all of the plastics off this scratch plate and everything now, so it's kind of raw plastic ready to be scratched up nicely and for what its purpose is. But you're going to put that little hex key somewhere safe. Okay, in case you haven't played one of these before, this switches on that pickup, middle position both at the same time, back position that one alone. They're a little bit high up now because I've basically lowered the action so much, relatively speaking. I'm just going to drop these down a little bit. The rule of thumb with pickups is you basically have them at about 3mm below the string at its lowest point, so something like that, a little bit lower on this end. Yeah, there's no hard and fast rule. The closer they are to the strings, the more output they tend to put out, but the less the tonal dynamics, it is argued. The further away from the strings they are, the quieter, in inverted commas, the lesser the output they have, but the greater the tonal nuance is the conventional wisdom. Okay, so we've got everything almost perfectly set up. The one thing we're going to check now is the intonation, and the intonation is a physical, it's a distance-based thing. Let me just check this. Is this loose, chaps? It's brand new. It shouldn't be. No. There's a bit of move. Ooh, no, don't like that. Oh, come on, toe man. That's junk. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put some thread lock on that. And I don't have a device that's... It used to be with this thing. Let me just check a minute. It used to be a thing, he said, just shivering. Once was a thing. Well, there's this thing, but that isn't any good. This thing came with it, but what will that do? Well, that won't change anything. What was that for then? There used to be a thing that I used to be able to use to, but it certainly wasn't that. Right, found it anyway, whatever it was. Yeah, Thomann have, I'll come back to intonation in a second. Thomann has, they've given you a jack socket that is effectively loose, right? Now, what I don't want you to have is a jack socket that comes apart straight away, and that's one of the dangers of an inexpensive or cheaper guitar. So I'm going to tighten this up, but in order to tighten it up, I'm going to need to take the plate off the side, pull it outwards a little bit, get access to it. I'll put on the thread lock when it's on the outside, and then we'll put the whole tightened up thing back on. Right, so that will make sure that it doesn't come undone. Unfortunately, this primitive 1950s style technology, there's nothing to stop this jack socket coming undone, and because it gets subject to wiggling forces all the time, it's almost certainly going to come undone in short order. Oh, very nice, Thomann. There comes some lacquer. The finish comes off with the screw, so they haven't really drilled the pilot holes properly. Luckily it's underneath the thing, so it's not a major problem. It's a clear coat that's broken off. You can actually see it in a little patch of it. Right, so what you can see, like, that is no good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick some low strength thread lock on here. Now this is actually undoable. I mean, you can undo it. No, it's not undoable, it's undoable. And I'm going to put that through there, and I'm going to put that on there, and I'm going to put this fellow back on here and gently tighten it up. If I can get purchase. Right, so when I've done this up, it's also pretty poorly soldered as well. It'll do. So when I get this back together again, I will tighten it with these jolly things and a bit of cloth so it won't dig into my hands. So when I tighten this up, the thread lock will hold it in place from here to eternity. That's the theory. And therefore we won't have it come undone again, because it's an absolute pain when this comes undone, because it just basically comes undone and breaks or falls apart, and the first thing you've got is a trip to your guitar technician because you need it refixing. Now the slight problem we've got with this thing here now is that there's too much wire sticking out the hole because we had to pull it out. I'm hoping I can just get it back in there safely. No, it's the other way around. Thanks a lot, Tomian. Get it in here, line it up. Which way around is it, Toman? It's neither way. That's pretty interesting. So if we're not careful, we can end up breaking. Right, so yeah, a bit primitive technology. So a joint that's designed really to come apart because it's subject to movement, waggling forces as I call them, and it's absolutely guaranteed to waggle itself free. It's just the nature of the beast. So anything we can do to give it some help to keep it in place is good. Very good. Right. That's that little thing solved. Little problems we find along the way. Okay, so let's go back to intonation. So intonation is a funny little thing. Basically, every neck, or commercial necks, modern guitar necks, are made to one of several scale lengths. What that means is it's a notional. Or it's a, no, actually not notional. It's a figure that is put into an equation that helpfully churns out a pattern of where these frets should fall and how quickly they should come together. So for a guitar with a scale length of 648, like this one, you put 648 into the equation and you come out with a template that puts the frets here. If you put in 628 millimeters, which is more of a Gibson scale length, then what will happen is you'll come out with a template with the frets just slightly closer together, just inside of this one, and they come together. They'll go out a step pretty quickly because it's a shorter scale length. The reason there are standard scale lengths is so that everyone can make stuff that fits everyone else's things, and that it's easier to make more consistent manufacturing and so on. So it makes sense from a mass production point of view. And the interesting part about the scale length thing is, while there is a fixed scale length for this kind of guitar, so everyone can agree on how to manufacture the neck, there is in fact a variation in how long the string actually is, and it isn't, believe it or not, actually 648. So the 648 mark on this guitar is probably, it's probably somewhere about, it's not the best tool to use. I want something that's pointy, a pointy stick Hercule. Okay, right, 648 mark is probably somewhere about where the stick end is now, just slightly forward of that thin string that we call E. But you can see that if that's a line coming back from where the 648 is, can you see how the other ones, I'm exaggerating now, are further away from it, right? If the They step backwards. So what it means is the actual length this string needs to be to work with a neck churned out with that formula, okay, is 648, which is the number that went into that formula, because you couldn't put 648 and a bit here and 648 where you can, you get a different kind of neck altogether. But that's produced to 648 standard, and this apex of this saddle here is 648 plus 2 or 3 millimeters. I mean, it depends how far back or forward, depends on the makeup of the strings, thickness and the composition of the strings. Now in these sets of nines, if you like, we've got 3, sorry about the flickering, we've got 3 wound strings. I better move away before we get ill. 3 wound strings and 3 plain strings. And you'll notice, well, you won't see it you won't see it. I was going to say you'll notice that on a sensible guitar, no, on a guitar like this is a right-handed one, okay? But we've got 2 groups of 3. You notice on the left that the thicker strings, the low E is always furthest away. Next bit forward is the A, bit forward is the D, and then the G is a bit back of the D, but the B is a bit forward of the G, and the E again a bit forward of the B. 2 distinct groups of 3, right? That's what you get with 3 wound and 3 plain. Now on the Telecaster, you technically would have the same thing, only this thing works in quite gross pairs, meaning you actually don't get the precision of adjustment on the intonation on this type of bridge. That's its only downside. It's only fall down, down fall, up fall, whatever. Draw back. Anyway, that's the word I'm looking for. So, but what we're going to do is we're still going to check to see, make sure that each string is at its correct length. So you can see that the saddles are movable. And the way we find this out is we switch on the volume and get a signal on our tuner, and we want to make sure that this string is set to E, which it happens to be. And if we want to be precise, we can do it, sorry about the view folks, we can do it here. That's perfectly in tune. And on the harmonic on the 12th fret is perfectly in tune. Now, if this string is currently the right length for this neck, when I fret the 12th fret, press it down to fret it, that should be on E. But actually, what it's showing me, it's a little flat of E. Go to B, tune that until it's exactly on B, on the open string and the harmonic, and fret it. That's a tiny bit flat of B. I'll try the G now. Flat. Try the D. Tune it. Ping it. Fret it. Flat. Okay, so it's telling me everything so far is flat, which means when you're fretted 12th note, or your note fretted at the 12th fret, presuming the note is tuned, the string is tuned to pitch correctly. If when you fret it at the 12th, it's slightly flat of the octave or the note, right, it means that the string is too long, and it means the saddle has to come forwards towards the nut a little bit, and that's what we're going to do now. And I take a screwdriver and I take this first pair and I undo them and push the saddle forward. Now interestingly, we don't have an awful lot of room to adjust it on this. That may be something of a limitation on this guitar that we may not be able to overcome, but let's try as much as we can. So I've pushed them all a tiny bit this way. We have actually I'm being hysterical, we've got probably another 5 millimeters. It's just I'm seeing the top of the string, top of the screw disappear. Now once you've moved it, you probably need to retune slightly and fret it again. It's closer. Very nearly. Okay, I'm going to push them all out a tiny bit more by the same amount. So what we're just getting now is just a fine tuning, and I'm basically fine tuning these pairs of strings into a better length for this actual neck, and that's what it means to intonate the strings. it's a little bit cruder in the sense we can only do them in pairs, and it would, to be a little bit more accurate, we'd want a staggered pair, and you can buy them actually in brass. Wilkinson make them. But I'm not really sure we hear too much of a difference. Now these are now spot on once I tune them. That's flat. Now the thing about these tuners is they're imprecise. Because they're, first of all, they're very low geared. As high as I can go. They're very low geared. And what it means is that they're imprecise when it comes to, they're not as good as a higher gear tuner, which are more expensive. The other thing, but that's from an operation point of view. That just feels stiffer to, or not stiffer, clunkier to operate. They're not as precise, but that doesn't in of itself make the guitar go out of tune. The other thing, the downside about them is that they're also a bit gritty in that they've got some duff spots. Again, on its own, once you get the guitar in tune, that won't make them go out of tune. But it's not massively, well, I was going to say it's not confidence inspiring. It's the difference. It's what you get difference when you're paying a budget price versus a quality tuner. And so if you're replacing them, you want the higher ratio, 19:1 or above in your tuners. Okay, so there we have it. This is the Harley Benton upgraded and set up. Upgraded in that we've given it a great setup, but we've also upgraded with a Tusk adjustable nut, and oh, I put the thing down there. Let's have a look. Let's just check on the first fret. I think it's just about perfect, but I'll check again to make sure. Yeah, we've upgraded it with Tusk nut and Tusk string trees. So the point being is we're going to make sure this thing stays. That's fine. Plays and stays in tune. So we've got a low first fret action. We've got all the hillocks and ravines taken out of the seabed of the neck, as we called it. Tweaked the pickups into the right place. Fixed the jack so it won't come undone again in a hurry. Intonated it, fitted new strings, cleaned the board, polished off and rounded off the frets as well, and given them a good old shine up with Auto Sol. So this is done, ready to go to Pat this week, and I'm really excited to be a part of helping her get back into playing after such a long time away, and I really hope that she has the best possible fun with this guitar, learning or rediscovering playing guitar on this guitar. Not at all a bad guitar to start doing that on, I would say. Just trying to keep these things impossible to keep clean. They're black and shiny. Right, so yeah, Toman, not a bad guitar. This one comes with the neck actually very well fitted and the strings very well aligned down the neck, so I didn't have to make any adjustment there. And generally speaking, actually, I thought the frets on that were pretty good, but it didn't like those bass notes, the 3 bass strings, until we leveled it out. So you can see that putting that time into it turns it from playable but irritated to much more playable. And what I'll do is, I don't know if there's one in the box, but I'll include this one as well. This one will let you adjust the saddles up and down if it's too low for you, or if later on you prefer it at a different setting. So you've got the option to do that. Just requires this small 1.5. No, this is the 1.5mm one. I don't know what's talking about. The other one is a 1mm one. There you go. There's your 2 hex keys. This one takes a 4mm one, but there must be one in the box. comes with it. It's probably one of those two, but I'll just put this on there in case. Okay, that's me done. Thank you for watching. Harley Benton, getting better all the time. That sounds like a song, Pat. Do you remember that song? It's getting better all the time. All right, see you soon. Thanks for watching. Used to be mad at my school, now I can't complain. The teachers adored me like fool, holding me down, turning me round, turning me up on the road. So I have to admit it's getting better, a little better all the time. Can get no worse, admit it's getting better, a little better since you've been mine.